This tutorial demonstrates how to enter a new payment that you've received into iForgeAhead. We'll be working on the full screen side of the system, but the steps are basically the same on the mobile side as well. Before we begin, I want to point out that while you can enter a payment directly from an invoice screen, in cases where you get paid later after you've already created the invoice, you don't need to find the invoice first. You can simply begin entering the payment, as I'll show you here, and iForgeAhead will find the relevant invoice or invoices for you. At the end of this tutorial, I'll show you the alternate way to start the process by entering a payment from the invoice screen. To get started from anywhere in the system, we'll go to the menu bar and under Money Matters, click on Payments. This will take you to a list of payments that you've recently entered into the system, and in the Action panel on the left, we'll click Add New Payment. That will take you to the screen to begin entering the information about the payment. All of the fields in this screen are required except for payment details. Now, some of the information is already filled out for you. The date is assumed to be the current date but can be changed. And the payment type, as well as these status flags that we'll explore in just a moment, are already set for you based on your preferences that you can control under Settings. You can set your default payment type as well as your preferences for these statuses by clicking on Settings, and then after you're at the Settings page, click on Settings for Payments. Now we'll begin by selecting the client that submitted the payment, and after you've selected the client here, the screen will update to show their account balance in the lower right. This is the amount that that customer currently owes you. You can change the date of the payment if needed, and then you'll enter the amount in this field. Now the payment type can be changed if you don't want to use your default in this case, and I'd like to point out one special feature, which is a payment type called Credit Memo. Any payments that have a credit memo as the payment type will not be included in your income reports. So there's a special use for credit memos that allow you to reduce the amount of a customer's balance in cases where they didn't actually pay you. An example might be if you accidentally overcharged them on an invoice and want to reduce their balance by the amount that was accidentally overcharged, or if you agreed to reduce a charge for them, you can use a credit memo. And finally, you can use a credit memo to write off bad debt in cases where you aren't able to collect a payment from a client. In this case, I'm going to say that this customer paid us by check, and then we can enter any information about the payment in the details field. Again, this is optional. A good use of this field is in cases where the customer did pay with a check, you might want to make a note of their check number. Now, these status flags, the first one relates to the details field. If you've entered information in the details that you would want your customer to see in reports about their account, such as the account summary at the bottom of an invoice or the account history report, you'll want this box to be checked. However, if you've entered notes in the details that are just for your use, you can uncheck this box. The second box relates to a feature called the deposit slip listing, which is covered in another tutorial, but basically it allows you to select a group of payments to print in a summary that can be attached to your deposit slip when going to the bank. If this particular payment will not be included in a deposit slip, you can check this box. Now, once all this information is correct, you'll click the button that says Apply to Invoices. At this point, your payment still has not been saved to the system yet, but iForgeAhead has searched and found any unpaid finalized invoices for this client, and it's listed these unpaid finalized invoices here. In many cases, you'll simply have one line where the customer is paying their only outstanding invoice. But in this case, we have more than one. We have two unpaid invoices. And when you have more than one line, you'll want to pay careful attention to this bold column, which displays how iForgeAhead has distributed this payment across the unpaid invoices. The logic that the system uses is to apply the payment to the oldest invoice first and then move forward until the payment is used up. In this case, it took the first $107.28 out of this payment and applied it to the older invoice, and then took the balance of the payment and applied it to the newer invoice. And once all this information is correct, you'll finish by clicking the Save button in the lower right. But if this distribution is not correct, you have an option to edit it. And I'm going to show you that technique here in case you need to. A common use for this would be a scenario where the older invoice is in dispute for some reason, and you're talking to the client about that issue, but they haven't paid that invoice yet. However, they did go ahead and give you a payment for the most recent invoice. We'll update the screen to reflect that situation here. We'll start with the older invoice by clicking the pencil to take it into edit mode, and we're going to change the current payment for this older invoice to 0, and that means that none of this payment should be applied to this older invoice. We'll click the green check mark to save, and then we'll finish by editing the second line, and we'll change this amount to show that the entire payment is going to go for this most recent invoice. And click the green check mark to save that line. And now that we've changed the distribution for the correct invoices, we'll finish by clicking the Save button in the lower right. Remember that whether you make changes in this area or not, you do have to click the Save button in order to save the payment to the system. Once you've clicked that, you'll be returned to the payments list, and the new payment that you've just entered will be displayed at the top of the recent payments list, right here. Now, as we wrap up, I'd like to show you the alternative way to start a new payment, and that is from the invoice screen. This is a technique that you'll use in cases where you get paid at the time of service. So at the same time you've entered the invoice, you already have the payment and you want to mark it as paid at that time. I'm going to go into an invoice, and if you'll just imagine that we just created this invoice and have just marked it final, and since I got paid at the time of service, I'm going to click this option that displays once it's finalized. We'll click Mark Paid, and that will take us back to the new payment screen that we were just exploring earlier. The only difference is that it's filled out some of the information for you. It's entered the client and the amount based on the invoice that we came in from. You can change the amount in this box if they paid you something other than the invoice total. From here, you'll follow the same steps we did before. Once all this information is correct, click the Apply to Invoices button and review how the system applied it to any unpaid invoices. And once everything is correct there, in this case we only had one unpaid invoice, and that's the payment for it, and we'll just click the Save button to save it to the system. That concludes this tutorial. Thanks for choosing iForgeAhead.